I would like to welcome you to our third session in our ongoing series, Lessons in Resilience from the Holocaust and Genocide. We extend our heartfelt gratitude to our partner, the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center, for their invaluable support in making this event possible. Today's event will feature Johana Sliwa, an unlikely rescue, a Jewish woman who helped thousands of Poles during the Holocaust. For those of you joining us for the first time, I'm Erica Fox-Zabuski, the Operations Manager with Classrooms Without Borders, filling in today for Ellen Resnick. And I am joined by my colleague, Jackie Goldblum, who's our Seminars Manager and who is helping us out today with this virtual program. Classrooms Without Borders is a beacon of experiential learning dedicated to enriching minds and hearts through education. As we celebrate 13 years of groundbreaking programming, our commitment to fostering inclusivity and social justice remains steadfast. Together, we've hosted an impressive array of programs in the past 3 years alone, welcoming 80,550 participants from 58 countries and 48 states. While the numbers may impress, it is the narratives, connections formed, and profound transformations experienced that undeniably define our impact. To date in 2024, we have had 45 captivating events planned with close to 3,100 registrants, with many more in the planning stages. If you would like to make a donation to support our mission, we'll drop the donation link for you in the chat in a few minutes. And please send any questions you have to me, Erica Fox-Zabuski, via the chat feature, and we will do our best to answer them all. It is now my pleasure to introduce our moderator, Tali Nates, who will introduce today's guest. Tali Nates is the founder and director of the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center. She brings a deeply personal perspective to the discourse on Holocaust and genocide education. Born to a family of Holocaust survivors, Tali's commitment to preserving memory and promoting reconciliation resonates profoundly. Her extensive contributions to academic discourse and her advocacy for human rights exemplify her unwavering dedication to confronting the shadows of history with courage and compassion. Tali's involvement in international initiatives, including her advisory role in the Malmö Forum, underscores her tireless efforts to combat anti-Semitism and promote Holocaust remembrance on a global scale. Recognized for her exemplary service and contributions, Tali's accolades, including the prestigious Goethe Medal, reflect her profound impact on shaping narratives of resilience and resistance. And now, Tali, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Erica. Good evening, good afternoon from actually still summery Johannesburg, which is a surprise to us all in May. It is a pleasure to see you all. For the Jewish friends, I hope that you had a lovely Passover, meaningful and peaceful. And our subject, of course, is very, very important, the subject of resilience, especially in times of conflict, in times of terrible turmoil. We do think about what does it mean to have resilience? What does it mean to be an upstander? What does it mean to resist? And in this series that we started in February, we decided to highlight different examples from different parts of the world. And for those that joined us in February and March, you saw that we started actually in Rwanda. And the reason that we started in Rwanda with Professor Nikki Fox and then with the wonderful upstander himself that rescued more than 500 people, Carl Wilkins, is because it is 30 years now, this on the 7th of April, this past few weeks, that we commemorated the 30th anniversary of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. I was actually in Kigali, I was in Rwanda, and it was really really emotional and heartbreaking to meet many of the survivors 30 years later. Many were children, and to speak to them about their resilience and how they are rebuilding their lives. Now, as Yom HaShoah is coming just next week, Holocaust Remembrance Day, Yom HaShoah, will come next Monday. We will commemorate it around the world. We are going to concentrate now on the Holocaust. And I want to acknowledge Pinchas Guta that is with us. Wonderful Pinchas, hello. Holocaust survivor, of course, from the Warsaw Ghetto, survivor of many, many camps, and a educator par excellence, really dedicates his life to speak to so many groups. It's wonderful to have you with us, Pinchas, but to also acknowledge all the teachers amongst you, academics and interested public. And today, as I said, shine a light on the Holocaust in our series about resilience and resistance, we have a wonderful, wonderful speaker, writer, academic, thinker, and that is, of course, Johana Sliwa. And Joanna's new book, together co-authored with Elizabeth B. White, is The Counterfeit Countess. And this is really an unknown story of resilience and resistance that Joanna is going to share with us. And we're so much looking forward to learn about this story, and hopefully many of us will get the book that is now out and is available. But let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Johana Sliwa, and of course, as usual, I'll put it in the chat, all her bio, that you will be able to read it a little bit more. So who is Johana Sliwa? She's a historian at the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany that you all know as the Claims Conference. And her workplace is in New York, but she is actually living in New Jersey. And we just chatted a little bit about her involvement on many other projects throughout her academic life and her professional life. She administers academic programs at the Claims Conference, but she had taught Holocaust and Jewish history at Kean University and at Rutgers University, and was involved in a lot of development of educational program about the Holocaust in her previous capacity. So it is really wonderful to have you today, Joanna, share with us not only about your new book, but also your expertise in working with educators in education and working with us and with the Classroom Without Borders and all other partners. Joanna, the floor is yours. And please don't forget to post your comments and thoughts and questions in the chat.
Thank you so much, Tali, for this really generous, wonderful introduction. I really appreciate that. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for choosing to attend this program. I am grateful to Tali for the invitation, and my thanks extend to Classrooms Without Borders, whom they know already. I have been admiring the work for a long time. And my thanks to the Johannesburg Holocaust and Genocide Center for the opportunity to share with you all the remarkable story of one woman's resilience, rescue, and resistance during the Holocaust. In 1948, several American newspapers covered the visits of a director of a social welfare agency from communist Poland. She toured the United States as part of her United Nations fellowship. And Americans were interested in this petite woman described as having a sparkle in her eye, a wide smile, and a crown of black hair. She was introduced as a former underground resistor in Nazi-occupied Poland and now an expert in child welfare. And Americans wanted to know what Dr. Janina Suchodolska thought of the communist rule in Poland. But to that, Dr. Suchodolska always politely replied, "I can speak only of social work." Now, she knew that she was on her government's radar. And one reporter from Raleigh, North Carolina, remarked in her article, and here's the quote, "I couldn't help thinking how much such an intelligent and interesting representative of the Polish people might do more in the long run for the bludgeoned old Poland if she could discuss things as they are in Poland." Now, Dr. Suchodolska was indeed brilliant and charming. She was also courageous and compassionate. During World War II, she was a member of the Polish resistance, and she was also a key staff in a German-approved relief organization for Poles. She could not openly discuss how the Soviet rule that was instituted after the war in Poland, how that affected Poles or impacted their country. Because if she did that, she could have faced prison time upon returning to Poland. And there was another thing that she couldn't talk about. She could not reveal that she was not even Dr. Janina Suchodolska or a social worker by profession. No one except a tiny circle of people knew that she was in fact Dr. Pepi Melberg, a mathematician and a Jew. Now, this story was unknown until my co-author, Dr. Elizabeth Barry White, and I published our book, which came out in January of this year. And the book is titled The Counterfeit Countess, the Jewish woman who rescued thousands of Poles during the Holocaust. Now, how did the story come to light? A nearly translucent carbon copy of a memoir landed in the hands of my co-author, Barry, in 1989. Barry was at an academic conference where she presented a paper about Majdanek. And Majdanek was a concentration camp, a labor camp, and a transit camp located in Lublin, just on the outskirts of Lublin, in German-occupied Poland. And here on these two maps, you have it exactly where Lublin, where Majdanek was located. And this was a camp where at least 63,000 Jews were murdered in the gas chambers and in shooting pits. A historian from the University of Florida gave Barry this manuscript, and he explained that this was a memoir of the Polish Jewish mathematician Janina Melberg, who masqueraded as the Polish Catholic Countess Suchodolska during the Holocaust. And what is more, she did not just lay low, she negotiated with top Nazi and German officials in Lublin to deliver food and other supplies to non-Jewish Poles who were held in Majdanek. And on top of that, she entered the Majdanek camp almost daily to deliver supplies to the resistance members who were imprisoned there. And she did that totally undetected by the SS. As a historian of Majdanek, Barry had to question the story. It was unlike any of the stories of Holocaust survivors that she had heard or read about. But then every story of a Holocaust victim and survivor is unique. And these are stories about the remarkable efforts to survive and to resist. And this is how we approached this story with Barry in 2018, when we began investigating Melberg's story in earnest. The author of the astonishing memoir that Barry received used different names at different stages in her life. But she retained the name Janina, which she started using during the Holocaust. And this is why I will refer to her as Janina for the rest of this talk. Janina was born in Żurawno. This was a small town in the Austrian Empire in eastern Galicia that became part of Poland after World War I. Today, the town is in Ukraine. And on the map here, you see the current borders, and not the pre-World War I or pre-World War II borders, but just to give this idea for us where this town is located. And before World War II, Żurawno was a typical shtetl, a town where Jews comprised nearly 50% of the residents. But what was atypical for a Jew was Janina's upbringing. Her father was a wealthy landowner who, because of his profession, enjoyed contacts with the local nobility. Janina received secular education, including tutoring in several languages. She also absorbed the way of speaking, the mannerisms, and the customs of the upper classes. This is significant because it later helped her perform her false identity as a countess. When she and her family moved to Lviv, today Lviv, Ukraine, Janina was exposed to life in the big city. She excelled academically, especially in math. She studied at the university under two of Europe's leading mathematicians at the time. But she was a realist in that while a master's degree in mathematics was attainable for her as a woman and a Jew, a doctorate was not. So instead, Janina studied under the wings of an eminent philosopher, a popular instructor, and an ardent Polish patriot. This professor accepted scientists, women, and Jews among his students. And he fostered in them the values that he was so passionate about. And I talk about Janina's background because this would also guide her later on as she calculated the risks of her decisions and actions. Janina obtained a PhD in philosophy with a specialty in mathematics. And in 1933, she married Henry Melberg. And you see the couple's photographs here. Janina, probably late 1920s, early 1930s, and her husband, Henry. The Melbergs lived in their beloved Lviv when World War II broke out. Germany, of course, attacked Poland from the west in September 1st. The Soviet Union invaded several days later on September 17th and occupied the eastern borderlands, including Lviv. So now Janina and Henry were living under the Soviet occupation. And at that point, Janina understood that she had to employ cunning and creativity to avoid deportation to Siberia of those people whom the Soviet authorities considered enemies of the state, class enemies. And Janina's composure and her persuasiveness enabled the Melbergs to keep their apartment and to continue working as teachers. So Janina could not disclose that she came from this privileged background. She hid that. At the end of June 1941, the situation of the Melbergs changed again. German forces occupied Lviv. The local Ukrainian population staged a series of pogroms, attacks against their Jewish neighbors. And you see a photograph here from one such pogrom that happened on the streets of the city. This was a frightening time for Janina and Henry. And then German forces organized regular roundups and shootings of Jews. Janina managed to save her husband from one such roundup. She followed the group of men being led by a Ukrainian militiaman. Her stubborn request to release her husband, even after she was hit in the face with a rifle butt, that caught an interest of a German soldier. So that German soldier assured Janina that Henry would return. He would only be taken to perform some labor and he would return. And he did. When a German order was plastered throughout the city, ordering Jews into the newly created ghetto, the Melbergs understood that this could spell the end for them. Janina's family friend came to the Melbergs' rescue. And this was Count Andrzej Skrzynski, whose photograph you see here on the slide. This is a post-war photograph. He's getting married to his fourth wife, but we don't have his pre-war or wartime photograph, so this is the only one that we have. Count Skrzynski arrived in Lvov on the first civilian train from Lublin. And he had a mission. His mission was to get the Melbergs out of Lvov and bring them to Lublin. But the journey to Lublin was dangerous because as Jews, the Melbergs could not use public transportation. And yet, this smuggling mission was successful until it almost wasn't. At the train station in Lublin, a German policeman detained Henry, saying that Henry broke a baggage regulation. So Janina sprang into action. She mustered all of her courage to confront the policeman and to demand that he release Henry. Her ruse worked. And it was this incident that enabled Janina's reinvention into the Countess. Because when she posed as an aristocratic Polish woman, she regularly faced German and Nazi officials in Lublin to negotiate for first the permission and then for the expansion of relief efforts for non-Jewish Poles. Skrzynski gave the Melbergs the false identities of Countess Janina and Count Piotr Suchodolski. So of course, Skrzynski was the Melbergs' rescuer. He is an unsung hero whose efforts to save the Jewish couple were completely unknown, even to his own relatives, until I shared the story with Skrzynski's granddaughter. So Skrzynski was a rescuer, but he also enabled Janina to engage in her relief, resistance, and rescue efforts. And of course, there was much for her to do. German-occupied Poland became the laboratory for the Nazis to develop and to test their racist utopia. By the end of 1939, special task forces called Einsatzgruppen shot about 40,000 Poles and 7,000 Polish Jews in a plan to eliminate Poland's intelligentsia and thus possible resistance. Then a massive ethnic cleansing campaign followed. The German authorities planned to remove even as many as 8 million Poles and Jews from areas that were annexed to Germany. And you see the areas annexed to Germany on the map. This will give you a better idea of how Poland was divided during World War II by Germany. So these 8 million Poles were supposed to be dumped in the general government. This was the German name for occupied Polish territories. And Lublin was one of the districts in the general government, and then Lublin then as a city, right, also existed in that way. The German forces embarked on the destruction of Poland's cultural and national treasures, on mass-scale looting and exploitation of the Polish people. And on this slide here, you see some examples of what I just talked about. The fact that Janina and Henry hid their Jewish identities did not mean that they were safe from persecution. They faced Nazi anti-Polish policy as well. This policy was brutal, but of course it was less deadly than Nazi policy aimed against the Jews. By the time the Melbergs arrived in Lublin, the 40,000 Jews who were living there had been confined to a ghetto already for 9 months. And you see photographs here from the ghetto in Lublin. In mid-March 1942, the German authorities inaugurated in Lublin what they called Aktion Reinhard. This was the largest mass murder operation of the Holocaust. Within a month, the Germans murdered 28,000 Jews in Lublin and transferred the surviving Jews to a new ghetto on the outskirts of the city. Janina had no connections to anyone in Lublin. She had no family there. She had no friends there. She understood that if she was discovered, this too would be her fate. So she resolved to use her position as a Jewish woman living undercover and having this kind of imposing as someone from a high social class. She decided to use that to help those whom she could. While she always had to be wary of prospective denunciators, she was also careful not to judge people offhandedly. And one experience stood out to her. When Janina met a young Polish Black marketeer, whose name was Oleg, she was struck by how he reaped profits from other people's suffering, from the suffering of the Jews. But right before the German authorities raided the Lublin ghetto, Oleg agreed to the pleading of a Jewish man to save his daughter. So Oleg staged a fake wedding with the Jewish girl and then arranged for a hiding place for her. Janina knew about this, and this incident made her realize that people cannot be boxed, even in these extreme situations, cannot be boxed into neat categories, as humans have the capacity to do both good and bad. So what did Janina do? She could not do things alone. So again, she relied on Count Skrzynski, her rescuer, to sponsor Janina's membership into the Polish Home Army. This was the military wing of the Polish underground state. The Polish underground state was a secret resistance organization in German-occupied Poland that answered to the Polish government in exile in London. And Janina also became Skrzynski's right hand in the main welfare council, which is commonly known as the RGO from the Polish, from its Polish name. This was an organization approved by the German authorities. Everything had to be approved by the Germans to assist only non-Jewish Poles. Maybe some of you may know of the Jewish social self-help. Jiddische Alleinhilfe or the Żydowska Samopomoc Społeczna. That was another organization, but that was tasked specifically with helping helping Jews in German-occupied Poland. But the RGO, the main welfare council, was only for the non-Jewish Poles. So here we have this German-approved relief organization that was supposed to be helping Polish people, and yet the requests that the RGO constantly made to the German authorities to bring aid to Majdanek prisoners, that was constantly being denied. So the no possibility to bring in relief to Majdanek also meant that no communication and smuggling channels could be created between the city and the camp. But no one was as successful in establishing contact with prisoners in Majdanek as 35-year-old Saturnina Malm. And you see her post-war photograph here on this slide. Malm was one of the women that we write about who were part of networks that were indispensable for sneaking in food, medicine, and messages into the camp and slipping out messages from prisoners. Malm was persistent in monitoring the camp surroundings and the routines of the camp staff. And this allowed her to establish contact with prisoners. The messages that she received from the camp described the dire situation. So Janina and Skrzynski continually pressed various German officials for permission to deliver food to the camp. In February 1943, the German authorities finally agreed. By the next month, by April, Janina's organization, the RGO, and the Polish Red Cross were providing 1,700 packages for non-Jewish Polish prisoners in Majdanek. But of course, Majdanek had many more prisoners, and everyone was in need. The RGO also received permission to deliver food once a week. And soon, acting on information that leaked from the camp, Janina was organizing a response to the typhus epidemic. And now I would like to read an excerpt that gives a sense of how Janina did that. It also explains how Janina approached German officials. And it also, this excerpt that I will read also speaks to the danger that Janina faced every time that she met with German officials. In mid-May, she obtained a meeting with the German medical superintendent of Lublin district. Appealing to him for help was a risky gambit, but she calculated that he might agree, if not out of human decency, then out of self-interest. As usual, she was left to wait until well after the appointed time before being ushered in to see the superintendent. He was standing when she entered, looking out a window, and he did not address her. She decided to dispense with the usual introduction. "There is a typhus epidemic in Majdanek," she announced. "Our committee seeks permission to provide inoculations." The doctor reacted predictably, spewing invectives against meddling Polish organizations that demanded rights, helped traitors, and coddled criminals. She waited until his harangue ended. "I came to see you because you are a physician. Though from what you say, I could as well have gone to the SS. But I came to you because you supposedly once swore an oath to relieve sickness and suffering, and I thought a doctor would surely help." He turned from the window to face the petite woman who had just addressed him with such calm effrontery. Then he invited her to sit down. "I'll think about it," he said in a different tone. "But how would you get it there?" "We could send it to you," she replied, "and you could deliver it to the Majdanek authorities." He began to pace his office while she explained what she had learned, that there were hundreds of typhus patients in the infirmaries and many more, including children, who were sharing bunks with prisoners who were not yet infected. He interrupted her. "I'll go to the hospital and see for myself what can be done. But," he threatened, "if any of you start spreading horror rumors, you know what will happen to you." He then went to the telephone, first to call the district doctor who hadn't heard anything about the situation, Then he called the head of the German Department of Population Matters and Welfare, who denied the whole thing. Nevertheless, the superintendent arranged a group tour of the camp hospital for the next day and invited Janina to accompany him. Janina readily accepted this opportunity to go inside the protective custody camp. Janina was stubbornly persistent in her dealings with German officials. Eventually, she got permission from the SS to take her deliveries all the way to the gate of each compound in Majdanek. And there, she could secretly interact with prisoners who unloaded the deliveries. She even managed to persuade the camp authorities to allow her to bring decorated Christmas trees, holiday food, Easter eggs for the Polish prisoners. And in this aerial photo here, you can see a part of a prisoner compound at the upper right. And next to it is a U-shaped building that housed the gas chambers. Janina knew what was happening to Jews in Majdanek. Until November 1943, she really hoped that her relief efforts would also reach Majdanek's Jewish prisoners. But all her plans dissolved when the Nazis organized Operation Harvest Festival. This was a code name for the murder of about 42,000 Jews in Lublin district, including 18,000 Jews in Majdanek alone. And at that point, Janina turned her focus to those whom she could still help. Janina's memoir contains many vivid examples of how she tried to help Poles in Majdanek and those who suffered greatly from German actions in Lublin and in the Lublin district. And through archival research, Barry and I discovered that Janina accomplished even more than what she included in her memoir. For example, in the summer of 1943, Janina won the release of thousands of Poles from Majdanek. These were peasants who were seized in an ethnic cleansing campaign. The SS sent those who were able-bodied to forced labor, and then dumped the rest, who were mainly children, women, the infirm, in the camp in Majdanek. And of course, these peasants were rapidly dying from the horrific conditions in the camp. Janina, through her negotiations with German officials, managed to secure the release of over 3,000 of those Polish peasants. But in the end, only a little over 2,000 were released, and nearly 200 of them died within 2 days. Half of them, so 100 of them, were children. And Nina makes no mention of this in her memoir. She did not view it as a success because she couldn't save all 3,600 of the peasants. And based just on wartime records, Barry and I documented that Janina negotiated the release from captivity of close to 10,000 Poles. Of course, it's impossible to estimate how many more survived because of her relief and resistance efforts. After we discovered that the memoir does not really do justice to Janina's accomplishments, we decided to write a biography and provide historical context for Janina's actions. And the main source, of course, is Janina's memoir. It enables us to tell Janina's story from her perspective, incorporating her thoughts and observations, and even the conversations that she recounted. So what I read from that excerpt were Janina's words, the kind of conversations that she recalled. Janina ended her memoir with a description of a tour that she took in Majdanek with a Swedish delegation after the end of the war. She offered insights into her motivations to risk her life every day to help others. And I quote, "It would have been natural to give up, to stop going to Majdanek, to go to pieces even. But then there would have been no reason to live. When so many were in such terrible need, I had to live to answer that need. I was one individual only in a vast suffering human family. If I thought only of the dangers to myself or to those I loved, I was worth nothing. But if surviving meant being useful to many, I had to find the strength to survive, which made it possible for me to feel some sense of achievement, even of pride." However, after the war, Janina did not speak about her survival during the Holocaust or her actions on behalf of Poles. A reader of her memoir would not know how remarkable her life was even after World War II. After the war, Janina decided that it was still too dangerous to reveal her true identity. But she dropped the Countess title and added doctor to her name. She introduced herself as a social worker. She joined Poland's new social welfare organization and became its deputy director. On the other hand, her husband Henry returned to his pre-war identity and resumed his academic career. Henry and Janina could be traced only by those who knew them from before the war, including Henry's two surviving brothers. Henry's niece shared with us these photos. They show a rare occasion when Janina, Henry, his two surviving brothers, and their wives were able to reunite. But all of them decided that they needed to leave Poland. Janina's assignments took her all over Poland. She saw the tragic consequences that the war exerted on the Polish people, on the country, but she also witnessed the challenging situation of Jews. She learned of the harassment of intellectuals who swayed from the Communist Party, the Communist Party line. She learned about the violence that Jewish survivors continued to face from their Polish neighbors. And this confirmed Janina's resolve to leave Poland. I began this talk with Janina's tour of the United States as part of her UN fellowship. Janina used this opportunity to establish contact with scholars here in the US who could help secure an academic position for her husband. Eventually, Henry left Poland on a fellowship, not to the US, but to Canada. Janina escaped from Poland in 1950. She arrived in Canada as Dr. Józefa Janina Spinner Bednarski Melberg, a mathematician. And while they created a new life for themselves in Canada, the Melbergs wanted to settle in the US. Janina's paternal family had immigrated to the US at the turn of the 20th century. But that is not why the Melbergs chose to live here. Chicago offered them amazing professional opportunities. Henry took a position in philosophy at the University of Chicago, and Janina, the remarkable woman that she was, found a position with the University of Chicago's offshoot of the Manhattan Project that had developed the atomic bomb. By the early 1960s, she became a tenured full professor of mathematics at the Illinois Institute of Technology. And this was an unusual position for a woman at that time. And it's another example in which, she challenged convention and continued to do so. Not long before her death in 1969, Janina recorded in a memoir some of what she did and witnessed during the Holocaust. Henry was hoping to get it published. He did not succeed. So it has taken 55 years for Janina's story to be known. And I hope that Janina's story will serve as an inspiration for readers in how to relate to other people and to build bridges of understanding. Throughout her life, Janina experienced suffering and persecution. She was a victim of two totalitarian regimes of Nazism and communism. And yet, she believed that none of us is completely defined by either the worst or the best that we do. Henry wrote that Janina's actions were guided by a simple mathematical principle. And remember, she was a genius mathematician. One life has a lesser value than multiple lives. And her own life, if she survived without seeking to save others, would have no value. So she became an unlikely rescuer, a Jew living undercover as a Catholic aristocrat, helping non-Jewish Poles. Janina's story is an invaluable testimony of one woman's survival during the Holocaust. It's also a testimony about the suffering and persecution of non-Jewish Poles under German occupation and how Poles tried to help each other survive. It is a story of individual resilience, but it is also a story about how a community, a group, responded to adversity and how they devised coping mechanisms in extreme situations. Janina Mellberg saw herself simply as one human, bound to all other humans, regardless of their misogyny, racism, and ideology. She wrote that during World War II, the murder of goodness was not thorough, and this too must be reported. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Johana. And here are the details of the book just came out.
Yeah.
What a fascinating story.
Thank you so much. So we have a website for the book if you are interested in following the story, our events, and we hope to develop, as we're working on it, to develop educational material for high school and college classrooms. Please stay in touch with Barry and with me. So now I will stop the share.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And maybe we can also drop it in the chat, that website, if people didn't manage to get hold of it. Thank you so much. It's very moving for me that Pinchas Guta is with us because, of course, one of the camps that he survived is Majdanek, and you it started the story with in what is today Ukraine, in Galicia, and then all the way to Lublin and Majdanek, and then to Canada and the United States. And this is unbelievable story, unknown story, as you said, of extraordinary individual, actually couple, but she was extraordinary. And many of the things that you spoke about, that she had the idea of you cannot put people in boxes, all humans are human, and that she moved in that kind of philosophy through such difficult times is really fascinating. And there are a few questions, but maybe I just finally just want to highlight two things. I mean, your excerpt of her conversation with the doctor, with the Nazi doctor, but basically almost reminding him that before being a Nazi, before being a German, you are a doctor. And succeeding in doing that is miraculous. You don't hear many stories like that. So I think that story by itself, that description by itself is really important educationally. How she managed to pass and made him actually act on it. And that is not her. I mean, it's her colleague, but then getting into Majdanek. So that excerpt of her colleague, forgive me, I forgot the colleague's name, but is amazing. And then just finally, before I'm going into the questions, we speak a lot about upstanders and righteous amongst the nations. And of course, Poland has the highest number, of course, the highest number of victims as well. So highest number, of course, of rescuers. But we don't speak so much about Jews rescue Poles. And that is an unusual story that is also important to speak about because, of course, so many Polish Catholics were killed by the Nazis. So I just wanted to bring that. We have a lot of questions, but maybe the first one, if you can speak a little bit about the motivations about assuming that identity, not another identity, that identity. And then Henry is a Jewish man. I assume he was circumcised. How was it to hide their identity? So Sarah is asking all those questions around how did they manage that? How did they manage to to adopt this very unusual identity? And then can you talk a little bit also, she's asking about their family later. Did they have children? Did they speak about it? So a little bit about that identity issue.
Mhm. All fascinating questions. Thank you so much. And so Janina did not have a choice basically in what identity she was given. She was given that identity by her friend who was an aristocrat. But that aristocratic friend, Andrzej Skrzyński, also believed that Janina could play the role of a countess. And she could do that because, as I mentioned in the presentation, she was raised with among members of the nobility in Eastern Galicia. So she was a good actress too. And she observed their kind of like what I said, the mannerisms. She knew French, she knew German fluently, she knew, of course, Polish, and she spoke some Russian and Ukrainian, and she was learning English as a child. She was very well educated, and she knew how to move in these kind of upper classes circles. But Henry, you're right, he was a Jewish man. Jewish men before the war in Poland Polish men were not circumcised before the war in Poland. So of course, Henry would really stand out if he was stopped on the street and ordered to drop his pants. And he did not have this kind of background that Janina had. He also grew up in a small town in what today is Ukraine, what used to be Poland, but he did not grow up among members of the nobility. And so Janina, who constantly always tried to protect Henry, it was either she or kind of Skrzyński, we don't know, we don't have this information, found a job for Henry working in an egg cooperative, like a farming cooperative, which was really strange for Henry because he was this intellectual, philosopher with a doctorate and all that, and he was working as, kind of like in the cooperative as an expert in eggs. But that's how he survived, but by not drawing attention to himself. And it was especially important for Henry because he also had a prior connection to Lublin. Before the war, he had a teaching stint in Lublin at a girls' school. He taught French. So there were people who might have recognized him on the streets. And when it comes to I think there was a question about motivations too, like why did she do that? I think that Janina had a very strong sense of Polishness because of her background, because of how she, her education, because of her circle of friends, because where she grew up in Lviv, where she interacted with many Poles, not necessarily only in Jewish circles. And she really hoped that Poland would survive. I think that speaks to her great patriotism, but also she was a humanitarian and she was very committed to helping other people because of their common humanity, because there were people who were in need. And she couldn't help Jews, right? She couldn't hide Jews. She couldn't help them by bringing food and doing all the things that she did for the Polish people. And she knew that she couldn't do that. So she focused her efforts on helping those whom she really could. In terms of their later life, they did not have children. Janina and Henry did not have children. Janina's two sisters immigrated to South America, to Uruguay and to Argentina. The sister from Uruguay came to the US days before Janina passed away. And after Janina passed away, her sister, Bluma, or Antonina, as she was called after the war, married Henry. And the sisters also did not have children. So you can imagine that finding information about Janina's family, about her pre-war life, was really difficult, because where could we turn to? I mean, this was a woman who was Janina was, her sole existence, survival, depended on covering her tracks. So how do you find information about her? We managed to do it, which is a story of its own. But I really hope that, and this is my goal, and Barry's as well, I speak for her here, that this story becomes better known. There's no one else to carry the story. As I said, there were no children that the Melbergs had of their own.
Wow, what a story! Even even that story of his sister marrying Henry and all that. But it's really interesting about how you're describing the Polish identity, many times. And I think it's really important to understand that in Poland, there were 3.3 million Jews, and they were from different streams, religion, affiliation. Again, sorry, Pinchas, I'm bringing you again because the story is so connected to you. But I'm thinking about you growing up in a Hasidic background. She grew up with nobility and with Polish, but pay attention that she married a Jew, which is really interesting. And I encountered many like that were almost assimilated, very Polish, spoke Polish, did not know Yiddish, and so on, yet they married Jewish spouses, if it's a woman or a man. So it's very interesting about this issue of multiple identities, that they held multiple identities. And with that, there is another question about then you spoke a little bit about the motivation. Why couldn't she help any Jews? And maybe just explain what you said, that she couldn't. Was it because of the risk to herself, or why was it? Did she try, as far as you know? And maybe to speak about her decision then to help Jews, Poles, and Poles in Majdanek. Why Majdanek?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when Janina and Henry arrived in Lublin, they did not have their own apartment. They were placed, so Andrzej Skrzyński, that count that saved them, he placed the Melbergs with two aristocratic women. And if they knew if the Melbergs were Jewish, I mean, we don't know that. Janina does not write about it in the memoir at all. And Janina, we believe that, Barry and I believe that, it would be very difficult for Janina to bring a Jewish person to the house that to the apartment that she shared with her rescuers. This would raise questions, and it would expose these two Polish women to danger. So I think that was one reason why she did not rescue other Jews, by hiding them. But like I said, she didn't have connections to Lublin's Jews. Like, they were already in the ghetto when she arrived. So she would have had to somehow approach the ghetto or find some connection. And she was scared herself, and trying to figure out, her newly acquired false identity and how to perform it. So I think there were other factors that came into play. And in terms of why Majdanek, well, when Janina joined the Main Welfare Council, the organization was determined to help prisoners, Polish prisoners in Majdanek, in transit camps, in labor camps, in the prison that was established in Zamek. This is the castle in Lublin. So it was natural for her to, because she worked for this organization, to focus her efforts on the places that the organization where the organization wanted to help the various prisoners and non-prisoners, as we've seen, expellees from ethnic cleansing campaigns, even children who are orphans. She helped to place them in orphanages. She also helped forced laborers to leave these kinds of like transit camps, from which they would be brought to the Reich, to Nazi Germany. So she devised this plan that she would kind of recruit various employers in the city of Lublin to give labor cards to these Polish recruits for forced labor. And once they had these labor cards saying, there is a pharmacy in Lublin that needs a pharmacist, and this man is a pharmacist. So she was really clever in how to get release of these captive people from captivity, how to help them. And again, she focused on those whom she could. She really, really hoped, and this comes out in the memoir, and we write about it, how she really hoped that the help that she was bringing, the food that she was bringing into Majdanek, would also reach the Jewish prisoners. And then again, November 3rd, 1943 happened, the murder of the remaining Jewish prisoners. And Janina learned about this from a secret message that was smuggled out of the camp. And this crushed her. Of course, it crushed her. But she resolved, and this comes out also in her memoir, and we write about it. It really made her even more determined that she will keep doing her work. And we can imagine, at that point, after the murder of the Jews after November 1943, she entered the camp again and again to bring help to these to the Polish people in need. And just thinking about it, it's incredible.
Can I just say one thing?
Yes, please.
As soon as I heard about the story, I managed to get the book, and I read it from one end to the other without stopping. It's one of the most fascinating documents that I have come across, especially in the times that I know all about, because I was there, despite the fact that I was only 8 when it started. But I went through the whole gamut of the 5 years of occupation and marches and things. So I really feel that it's a priceless book. It's a book that is so important to show the resilience of human beings. And I can tell you, there must be many, many stories like that, amongst the Jewish people and amongst the more non-Jewish Polish Christian people who are lost. We don't know about it, but there was a lot of heroism and I saw it myself in the concentration camps, including Majdanek. What was going on amongst the Jewish and non-Jewish, because at one stage we were mixed up also there. So from the point of view of this book, I don't want to interfere with the webinar, but I just wanted to say how impressed and how important this book is. So thank you very much for going to the great lengths. After I've read the book, I know to the lengths that you went, and all the way, and the way that this woman stood up to the Germans each time she faced them. It was just incredible. She was shaking inside, and at the same time, she was saying, I am going to do that. And this is just incredible. So thank you. Thank you for writing it. And thank you for being here, and I can meet you and see you in person.
Mr. Guru, thank you so much. Your word, what you said is so extremely meaningful to me, and I will pass it on to Barry. Thank you so much, really. It's really moving, and thank you for being here, and expressing, your thoughts and sharing your experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pinchas. It means a lot because you were there, you were deported during the uprising that we just marked to Majdanek, and to think that this woman is doing this at that time is unbelievable, really. And after the Harvest Festival, to still come into Majdanek after all the shooting that they knew was going on, and it's really an unbelievable story. And Johana, I think also what is important about the book, and people want to know where to buy the book, and we are going to speak about that in a minute. But I think maybe an added importance is to understand that Majdanek and many other camps, but specifically Majdanek, had many Polish Catholic, mainly, prisoners. Of course, deportation, as you said, ethnic cleansing from Zamość and so on into Majdanek of children and families and so on. So the story of the Holocaust is very complex. The story of the Second World War is very complex. And I think what you did with Barry in your book is allowing us to see the complexity of a camp, for example, like Majdanek, and not to forget that complexity. I just wanted to say that, and I'm not sure if you want to add, because I think that is a very important point of your book.
Thank you so much, Tali, for saying that. And as in the Jewish world, right? We know about, of course, about Majdanek, and it was surprising. It was surprising. No, I'm also an educator. I shouldn't be surprised, but it still was surprising to me that when we wrote our book proposal and when we turned to editors and then to at publishing houses, they did not know about Majdanek. And that was shocking as well, but it also confirmed us in the importance of telling the story, that it means that we need this story. We need the story about Janina, about her, unlikely rescue, right, and her survival, but also the story about Majdanek and the story about the persecution of Polish people. That is another thing that we kept hearing again and again, when we came up with the proposal, that people didn't know that that non-Jewish Poles were also persecuted in so many different ways by the Germans. So I think it was very important for us, for Barry and me, to contextualize this all historically, and to write a book that is not solely academic, but that is accessible to any reader who has an interest in a story, or to kind of expanding his or her story about the Holocaust and World War II.
Fantastic. That brings us to few people that are asking again how to get the book. So I assume that you can order it from Amazon and from others. I'm not sure. Danny asked about South Africa. I'm not sure. Do you know who is the publishers? Maybe we can get it into the Holocaust centers. And then Danny, maybe through the publishers, we do have the shops, in the different Holocaust centers, and maybe we can sell your book. Shall we explore that possibility? I'll be very interested.
Thank you so much for the interest and for the support. I will be happy to discuss this, by separately, like how we can arrange this, whom to contact. So the book can be purchased anywhere where books are sold, of course, Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It's even sold at Costco in the US, and independent bookstores, everywhere that books are sold. The book can be purchased. For other countries, we have a British edition, but I think the British edition is only for like, the UK and Australia and New Zealand. And it's not for South Africa. I would have to find out about that. There will be a Polish translation that will come out maybe next year. So we have interest there. There will be an Italian translation, a Russian one is I think already completed, and a Slovak version.
Wow, congratulations. This is absolutely fantastic. So we will talk about that, and Danny, just be in touch. We will make sure that the books are also available, at least in the Holocaust centers, if not in exclusive bookshop around the country. And that brings us maybe to the last question that we have time for. There are lots of comments and you know, people congratulating you and thanking you and saying that how wonderful it was, and other questions. But maybe it's a very interesting questions, I think. You know, when Righteous Amongst the Nations, rescuers saved Jews, many times Jews looked for that Righteous Amongst the Nation to recognize through Yad Vashem or to look or support. Did any of the Poles that Janina saved ever looked for her or managed to stay in touch with her, as far as you know from your research?
It's a great question, but the short answer is no. I mean, the Polish people whom he helped knew her as the Countess, as Countess Suchodolska. He had no clue that she would be, she was Jewish. And of course, she continued working in Lublin after the war, when Lublin was freed from Nazi rule in summer 1944. She worked from Warsaw, from 1945 until 1950 when she escaped. But she never returned to Poland. And we don't know if she kept in touch with anyone. And it would have been dangerous for her because she defected, basically. And it would have been dangerous for the Polish, for Polish colleagues or others who stayed in Poland and who would be in touch, who would stay in touch with her. When you ask about, Righteous Among the Nations, Andrzej Skrzynski is not recognized as a righteous. That is a goal of ours, of Barry and mine, to ensure that he is recognized, and we have evidence for that. We know that Janina kept in touch with him after the war, that she visited him. He lived in a spa town in Cieplice in Western Poland, I think. So she visited him a few times. We also know that she sent some money to him and his wife after the war, so that they kept in touch this way. But we don't know of any other kind of connections. We don't have the personal archives of Janina. We don't know what happened with that. We don't even have the original memoir that was written in Polish. We only have the translation that was done by Janina's husband. So there are many, things that are still unknown, but the story of Janina fascinates Barry and me so very much that we continue to do research and to speak about the story in the hopes that we will, someone will be, this is my, my distant relative. I have something that I would like to share or show you. And yes, so our research does not stop. The book is done, but the research continues.
Fantastic. And I think that when the book will be published in Poland, maybe you will have a knock at the door and say, wait a minute, that sounds very familiar. I didn't know that woman, but that woman saved my grandfather's life. So who knows, maybe there will be a continuation to this story, and I do hope so. But Johana Sliwa, really, thank you so much for fascinating talk today, for all the research that you and Barry did, and for teaching us, all of us, something new about rescue, about resilience, about resistance in the Holocaust. And really, from the bottom of my heart and all that came and joined us today, we thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much, Tali, for the wonderful conversation and for the invitation. And thank you so much to the team at Classrooms Without Borders for providing this platform to share Janina's story, and to also, of course, to everyone who tuned in, to all of you who are interested in this story. I really appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And Pinchas, thank you. Always such a pleasure to have you and learn from you and interact with you. And now I'm giving the floor back to Erica. Erica is muted.
There we go. So thank you so much, Tali, and thank you to, of course, Johana, for your really captivating presentation, showing how the efforts of one person can make such an incredible difference, and also really what the true meaning of what it means to be a humanitarian, looking out for all of humanity. And Tali, thank you for leading the insightful discussion. And to Pinchas Scooter, of course, thank you as well for your contribution and for your loyal attendance at our virtual programs. We are very honored to have you as such a regular participant. We hope you will join us again for our next program in this series, Lessons in Resilience from the Holocaust and Genocide. The next one is Wednesday, May 22nd, which features Dr. Khachig Mouradian, Resisting the Armenian Genocide, Lessons in Resilience from a Clandestine Network of Humanitarians. You can find more information on this and our other programs, the virtual programs and community programs at cwbpgh.org/events, which I am just putting into the chat there. And our next program is John T. Blackman, our next virtual program, Rabbi John T. Blackman, who will be doing a program for Yom HaZikaron on May 9th. And you can get information there at the website. I also should say that I don't know if it's true, or I just imagine that I've been hearing something about film rights perhaps being purchased for the story. I'm sure it would make it a really incredible film. So maybe that will be happening as well. We'll see. As you all know, we do not charge for our virtual and community programs. They are made possible by gifts by generous donors. And I would like to thank some of our donors who have sponsored our virtual programs for this past year, including the family of Michael and Amy Bernstein, Dr. Carrie Braun and Robert Levin, Robert and Megan Glimcher, John and Angela Kamen, Robert and Tony Mallet, Chuck and Lori Perlow, the Plung and Resnick families, James and Louisa Rudolph, Hillary Tyson, and Charles Porter. But we are also happy to accept donations if the spirit moves you. And Jackie has put the link into our chat here as well, as we can't do anything that we do without support from you, and we're very grateful for it. And we're glad to be able to present our programs free of charge. I wish you all a good spring. We have Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaShoah are coming up, and then Shavuos. For those of you who celebrate, I wish you all to stay safe and healthy, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much.